Good morning. Elden Ring Nightreign is now officially out in all territories as far as I am aware. It is now March the 30th, and I finally got around to playing it at about 4 a.m. this morning with a friend of mine. We did quite a lot of grinding today on the game. I was initially planning on playing as Revenant or Duchess in my first run, but neither of them are unlocked at the onset of the game. You have to meet conditions to unlock them. This video is going to be my first run that I did, which I am playing Iron Eye in, as I was not expecting to originally, but ended up trying him out. There's a lot of slip-ups in this video. This is mainly going to be gameplay for you to have on in the background if you wish to just see what my experience was like. I am not a perfect player by any means, and there is a lot of human error in this gameplay, but there are a couple things that I want to highlight in this video. So there will be points in this video where it will be silent for a while, and then I'll come in and talk about things as they happen. I want to address a few things that will happen later on in the video right now before they do, which is that there's a point in this video where we get into a pretty rough spot with a Draconic Tree Sentinel, which is a fight we definitely could have handled better, and I was very greedy and wanted to get as much as I could out of the fight and make sure that we killed it. That ends up being a very foolish decision to make. At the beginning of the run here, we're going to run into a rise, which is one of the main things I want to bring up as a point of, well, how should I put this? Concern's not the right word, but it is definitely an annoyance. The rises in this game are very strange. In the playtest, we knew of two ways to solve a rise mechanism, which was a statue and a sigil that you could find in a bush. In the official game, there are, of course, many different ways to deal with a rise. However, they are extremely difficult to find, and since we do not know all of the locations yet, it is almost just not worth the time investment to go after a rise at the moment. I'm sure after we know more about them, we will find it more worth it to do so. The rise actually ends up having the contraption on the wall on the left side of the door once you enter the rise itself, in this instance, in this run, which is very fun. The rises are very important for a character like Recluse to get. It's not that big of a deal if you miss out on it for a lot of the other characters, but for Recluse, if you have to stop going after a rise and leave it behind, it definitely sucks a lot more. Iron Eye was a very fun character to play in this gameplay. I enjoyed the slashing ability that he has, where he lunges across the ground towards an enemy and then marks them, which makes them take more damage. His ult is very fun. You'll see there pulling back the massive arrow and the wind running off of it. He's probably one of the best characters in the game, if not the best character from what I've been hearing, and him and Duchess are a very deadly pairing. I'm going to talk about this team setup a little bit while I'm at it. My friend played Raider here, and while she had no issues with the ult, there's something very funny that can happen with Raider's ult. I mean, obviously there are a few things that can happen, like you getting stuck on Raider's ult suddenly in the middle of combat. That actually happened to me in a different run with someone else playing Raider, and I believe I went down because of it, or at least almost went down, when it suddenly popped up behind me while fighting a boss. The other thing that happens with it that is kind of an issue is that bosses can get stuck in it, and it makes it hard to hit with melee, and I'm pretty sure nearly impossible to hit as someone like Iron Eye or Recluse that rely on projectiles. So that's fun. But it's not that big of a deal. The ult, when used in a good way, can be pretty fun and beneficial, but I find that playing with random people, you run into mediocre Raider ults from time to time. One of the things in this game that I want to highlight before I break for a bit is there's a massive lack of communication features in this game, which is not the best for a game that relies a lot on cooperative gameplay. Running to areas together is a core part of the experience. You need to be able to clear out camps efficiently and points of interest off the map. But instead, what ends up happening a lot of time is a big amount of separation if you are not playing with two other friends. I suppose while I'm at it, I can talk about something else before I break for the moment, which is that the online for this is actually very solid. However, if you were playing as a duo, for some reason, FromSoft did not consider the idea that a duo team would be matchmaking, and there seemed to be some strange bugs with it. I do not know why those bugs are there. I am not exactly sure how they did not think of duos playing together, because the matchmaking seems to work fine if it's 1 or 3 players together. But if you start out with a duo and try to matchmake for a third, you run into some issues. However, I did find a fix for us later on was that if we used one of the popular passwords like Fextra, all caps, it actually ended up matchmaking us with a third person pretty reliably instead of us sitting there for 10 minutes or infinitely without it matchmaking us at all. We tried all manner of resetting the game and getting rid of passwords and changing settings around, stuff like that, and nothing worked except for the Fextra password. So I would recommend that if you're running into that issue. Overall, though, the multiplayer is very good. This game is definitely better played with a friend, or preferably 2 friends. I would almost argue until they fix the matchmaking, or unless you're using the password system that I mentioned, and it actually works for you, that you would be better off playing solo, or finding a random third to just group up with you and your second friend. I will be back in a couple minutes to go over a few more things. I will put a chapter if you would like to skip to that instead of watching the gameplay. But this video would be best enjoyed passively. If you wish to skip around, though, you may, of course. I hope you enjoy the video, and if you're going to leave here, then have a good day. I'll be back soon. one of the things that you really need to focus on doing in your Nightreign runs is going after churches. Obviously, they increase your healing flasks, your Estus flasks, rather. Very important to the core gameplay loop. So we typically end up beelining for the churches a lot in our runs. Another one of the places, hotspots that you should go to that we actually don't end up going to in this run are caves. Caves have smithing stones in them, and they can be used to upgrade your weapons at anvils when you meet up with a merchant or make it to the end of a run. We foolishly did not go after them. Nice wasted ult, by the way. Me. We foolishly did not go after them for a couple runs until we realized that we needed to put it into the usual plan of running around different POIs to make sure we visit. Another thing that we did not go after were specific weaknesses for bosses. For the first boss, Gladius, which is weak to Holy, we did not go after any Holy damage. But overall, we did well enough this run, especially for us playing two characters that we did not have access to in the playtest, me and my friend here. The gameplay is a little sloppy, definitely on my part. I have some missteps, especially later on. There's a couple things added to this that were not in the playtest. The formidable foes, which you will see later on when I get my ass handed to me over and over from my stubbornness, which give pretty good loot from my experience. They are definitely worth killing, however, they are very hard to kill if you do not have good loot or have enough levels, so it's one of those things where you kind of have to just gauge if it is worthwhile, if you have what you need to be able to take care of them. So I end up not being able to make it up top here to kill this crystal guy. End up having to dive off due to getting lost before getting in there. A couple things I want to talk about. I mentioned the rises earlier in the matchmaking and whatnot, but I wanted to talk about how good the characters are in terms of personality. They actually have a very solid story for all the characters from what I can tell so far. I have not been able to experience all of it, obviously. Have not had enough time. But the characters are very identifiable. The costumes, which you can unlock, the garbs, rather, are also very cool. Definitely show a lot of what the character is style-wise. Raider having this massive skull on his head and whatnot is pretty sick, if you ask me. We end up running into, unfortunately, the same bosses that we saw in the playtest. This is one of the main things I want to talk about, was the randomness run to run, the variation of gameplay. I'm not exactly sure how many bosses this specific expedition has. The one for Gladius called Tricephalus, I believe. I have only seen the ones from the playtest, even having played this specific expedition, I believe, 3 times in my time playing today. Only saw the bosses that were in the playtest, which is a bit of a shame, but I imagine there are more. I just probably got unlucky. We also noticed that there is a pretty good deal of variation, at least it feels like it, in the placement of POIs. The actual physical map itself, I do not believe is that different from run to run. I don't know if it even changes, really. I felt as if I couldn't tell regardless because I was so focused on the actual action, the actual stuff that I know for a fact was randomized, that it actually made it harder to recognize if the physical area was at all different. I think there is some variance to it at the very least. It certainly felt like it. When you defeat a nighttime boss, in my experience, you only get an option of perks, which is interesting. I thought that they would give you actual loot sometimes, but they don't. But it's fine. The perks tend to be decent, but sometimes you can get 3 options that do nothing for you, which is a shame, obviously, but hell, that's how roguelikes work. So we end up actually going back for this crystal guy up top on this castle that we had to bail out of fighting before, and pretty well kicking his ass. I was struggling to figure out the precision aiming system for Iron Eye. I'm not sure if I was doing it right. I was probably controlling it completely wrong. This was the only run I got to do as Iron Eye, because I played only Duchess after this for the rest of my time playing for day 1. But I would like to play more Iron Eye. He has a ridiculous looting ability that makes loot better overall. Sometimes you can end up in situations like this where you get 2 items that you are pretty damn sure you're not really going to get any use out of either way for the character you're playing, but that's just the way it goes. Our teammate, our random that we had from matchmaking, was playing Executor in this run, and the Beast transformation is pretty sick, although I'm not sure how good its damage is. My friend who tried out Executor in one of our runs after this one said that the damage felt pretty weak in Beast form, so I am not sure of that myself. I plan on trying out Executor. Of course, I want to try out every character. But I would say form your own opinions, try it out. Executor is a very cool character, but is definitely a character that requires quite a bit of skill, depending a lot on pairing. I know there's a lot of jokes, obviously, about how Executor is going to be running around spamming parries and not really getting anything done. So, you know, learning curves and all that. I figure the average person is probably going to struggle quite a bit. Here is the terrible fight that we get into. We really do a lot of damage the moment that we run into the fight, but I definitely play very stupid here. I'm not going to talk over this entire section of it. I'm actually just going to let this gameplay speak for itself, but you will see how disgusting this is. I'll be back at the end of Night 2, going into the Night Lord fight to talk over some more stuff. I will put another chapter for those of you that just want to hear commentary for you to skip to. I'll see you then. So we finish off the Night 2 boss. As I previously mentioned, we only ran into ones that showed up in the playtest. But I ended up taking a pretty bad perk, but it doesn't really matter either way, to be honest. We really should have gone after a cave in this run. I mentioned earlier would have been a great idea for the sake of upgrading weapons, but it also doesn't really end up mattering all that much. Gladius, at the very least, does not feel as if he is necessarily a boss that needs to be dealt with in a very particular way. Gladius is a relatively easy fight. I think you can get away with a lot of error in Gladius' fight, but he is a very well-designed fight. You get this final little bit here where you can upgrade weapons and shop with the merchant. We already knew about all this and everything. Gladius, of course, being a boss that splits off into 3 dogs, you're going to see in the footage here pretty soon once we make it through the big doorway. You get a cool introductory cutscene every time you finish the second night and move on to the boss, where you and the other 2 people in your party head through the door together. I figure I should talk about what I think of the game overall while we're going into this final section here, before the gameplay finishes itself out. I definitely enjoy the game. It is very well made, of course. FromSoft has a level of quality in all of their releases, regardless of if it is a experiment or not. I would love to see them put in crossplay, if possible, although I'm not sure if I mentioned this already or not, but Bandai is not exactly the best about that sort of thing. Regardless of if FromSoft is the main developer of the game or not. So we get sent in here for the fight, run forward, and they will spawn in pretty soon here. Pretty great design. Reminds me of the watchdogs from Bloodborne that you can find in the Chalice Dungeons. I enjoy this fight a lot. The second fight as well, I enjoyed a lot. There was a specific fight I am not going to name that I do not care for very much. I think it has a very odd idea behind how you are supposed to deal with a specific attack, although we are not sure for certain if that is how it is supposed to work or not for that boss. Perhaps I will talk about it in another video. But for overall first impressions, playing with people in a situation like this in a Souls game actually feels right. If you have ever summoned before with actual people doing co-op in one of the other games, it always feels very fun to go through areas and everything together killing bosses, so it only makes sense that eventually this would work out as a full multiplayer experience. The amount of content in the game feels like quite a great deal, with there being a good amount of costumes, garbs for each character, I believe being about 5 for each, unless you count the default as well, in which case I believe that makes it 6. You don't unlock the special designs until you actually fully beat the game, but you do unlock the first set of garbs, the light and darkness ones, once you beat the second Night Lord, I do not believe that the Night Lords need to be done in any specific order. I don't think you have to go down the list in order to unlock things in a specific way. I don't think they have any arbitrary restrictions on that. One of the other features about the game I want to compliment while I am finishing up here is there is a remembrance system that gets used to tell stories of the characters, which is really great. It actually adds a lot of personality to the characters and how they interact with each other, rather. I like that they actually seem to care about each other in different instances. I don't want to give anything away for those of you that have not had the chance to experience any of it yet, or anything like that. But this is probably the most direct storytelling that we have seen in a FromSoft game in the way that it is given to you. It is almost quest-like. So that is pretty nice to have a storyline that you can follow along through the journals and the objectives that it gives you to do. The other thing I want to compliment this game on is just how great it seems on a scale level. The idea that everyone had was that, or at least that I saw a lot of people talking about, was that a lot of reused assets would drag the game down. I think that conversation is something that I don't necessarily agree with overall with reused assets. I think if we pay $40 for a DLC, then it's fine to pay $40 for a spin-off. That's just the way I see it, at least. But I think that it really does fall into its own quite a bit. The tutorial is also good in this game. I also like the way that you unlock Revenant. That is a good plus. A lot of the teamwork in this game is a great feeling, too, once you actually get some solid coordination with people. I think the game definitely does have its downfalls in certain ways that I talked about earlier. Multiplayer being hard to get into with duos and other things. I don't want to reiterate, sound like a broken record, but it definitely does make it a bit annoying to deal with certain things about this game. It being a FromSoft game, it can be obtuse at times, although, like I said, I'm not exactly sure who would be to blame for this whole thing anyways, with the matchmaking duo mess and all that. Even at the end here, I end up having some silly slip-ups, like trying to use a cracked tear to heal myself, which doesn't do anything, of course. The characters are all very unique. That is a big plus. So, in terms of if I would recommend Nightreign to people or not, it is definitely a very challenging experience. I think that for those that are new to FromSoft, it would be best to get into this game because the experience of playing with others is probably going to make it easier for those that struggle getting into Souls-likes. I don't have a exact rating to give it. I may end up doing a full-on review in the future to give you that, but for now I'm going to leave it at I very much enjoy the game, and it is pretty damn good. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you think of the game in the comments. And in case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.